Dream Your Life Amazing, Chapter 4, Working with Others. The older I get, the more valuable and powerful are the concepts of managing relationships, how we define each relationship, and how we can best manage all the possibilities with each person we meet. I've noticed that if done with wisdom, relationships are the greatest reward. For some individuals, it's people who are the largest pain and crisis. Influence. I have read an entire library of books on the topic of influence because it was the cry of my heart to have two things. First, to have a voice in my life from a dad or a mentor, and second, to be a voice to others. This topic of influence is normally called leadership, but I think it's much more than that. I think influence is one of the primary cries of the heart of the greatest of goals for humans to achieve. You win nothing if you don't win influence. To be a person who is trusted to speak into the soul of another has the greatest privilege and responsibility. We are supposed to be both teachers and students. If you are a spouse or a parent or an employee, you have thousands of opportunities to change the direction of the relationships and cause them to go to a higher level. What I mean is that most people allow social rules and expected engagements to set the parameters for most of their conversations. You have the ability to add value, change the roles in relationships, and build great things with people you engage. Just take a listen to the average conversation at a family gathering or social event. You will find most conversations superficial and are deficient of any form of resolve and lack of valued stimulus. I am not saying you can't be good at social chatter, but if the content of 3 hours of chatting has not inspired, provoked, or changed a person's mind or direction, I deem it a failed encounter. Please understand, I'm not saying that you need to be confrontational or political or offend people. You can break out of expected chatter norms and ask questions that challenge, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? How are you going to handle life when your children become teenagers? Do you have any plans in place for transitioning from raising children to raising teenagers? Rather than talking about the new brand of tires you found or how much you enjoyed last night's pizza, talk about people's lives that are being changed by your service. Talk about the books you are reading. Offer them help if they confide in you with a struggle. Be a change agent instead of a twig floating downstream. The dark side of influence is manipulation. Those whose only agenda is their own are selfish salespeople who use tactics to manipulate people. Influence and the ability to win people's hearts and minds is found in service and in listening. It's living a life that is dedicated to win-win in relationships. See the People First chapter. Listening Mastery. In winning the hearts of others, the greatest skill you can master is that of master listening. Most people have such a longing to be truly heard that if you take the time to invest in hearing the hearts and desires of others, you will win more friends and have more influence than you can ever imagine. Few people have learned this skill. The art of listening comes with time, but you can achieve a fairly good result in a short amount of time by beginning with a few simple changes in the way you engage others. Listening is the most powerful tool in a success arsenal, but you have to listen. I mean really listen. I have to say that most people think they're listening, but in reality, the person on the other side doesn't feel heard. The more you agendize the relationship, the more you are unable to hear the other person's story or version of the current encounter. The art of listening is not the intellectual ability for you to comprehend the information. It is the ability to convey to the other person that they are heard. Realize the agenda in each listening encounter is not just to accomplish a task, but to win a person's heart. The more a person feels or is emotionally involved in dialogue, or the higher the intellect or reasons for the communication, the more effort has to be taken to convey that you hear them. Hack number 1, listening. I will share with you just a few tricks used by master salespeople, but there are a few things to keep in mind. If you use them as tricks and you don't really care about people, you will come across as a scammer or disingenuous. Secondly, different personalities respond to different kinds of feedback. Where one works with one person, you could be scaring others away. For example, if you use the compliment hack, no matter how genuine you may be, there are some people who feel like you are setting them up for something and will become very suspicious. Watch for signs when you talk. Does a person's engagement increase when you talk, or do their eyes dart away? Do they light up or cringe? Pay attention. A couple of years ago, I was hired by a very wealthy business owner to consult him and his team on the construction of an online project. During my week's stay, he would try to impress us by showing everyone how much money he had and how much people liked him. The first night out, he went into one of his most frequented pubs and he loudly announced himself and got the traditional greet from the crowd. They obviously knew this guy. The first sign he didn't see was how fast all the people went right back to their conversations after the traditional greeting. If it happened any faster, they might have gotten whiplash. Next, the business owner walked up to a very attractive waitress and kissed her on the face. I think anyone with the slightest concern for body language would have known she was close to nauseated by the encounter. But the business owner didn't notice. Instead, he turned to me and said, "Women love me." Understand, this guy's megalomania was pretty extreme. Megalomania, obsession with the exercise of power, especially in the domination of others, delusions of grandeur, thirst, lust for power, delusion about one's own power or importance. I use these extreme examples to show how most people are not paying attention to the signs. You don't have to be self-absorbed and uncaring to miss them. All you need to do is be not paying attention. The best of all hacks to letting a person know you are listening is to ask a question. Repeat what they just said in the form of a question and let them take on a role of advisor to help you understand. You can even make the question partially challenging by playing the devil's advocate like, "Okay, I understand that, but what would you say if I said something like this?" Hack number 2, light bulb moment. When a person talks and they say something you've never heard before or in a way you've never heard before, acknowledge it. You either say, "Wow, I've never heard that before," or you take out a piece of paper and write it down. The favor you win as you celebrate someone's wisdom will be rewarded almost immediately. Hack number 3, listening pose. Body language is extremely important. It can convey you really care about their words. My kids were all homeschooled and had access to me all day as I worked from home. But when they had a question, I would take my hands off my keyboard and turn my chair to face them and listen as if they were a $1 million client. Look for little opportunities to show them that you value their words. So when the phone rings or you get a text, don't take the call. Instead, say, "I'll get back with them later. I'd much rather be talking to you." Hearing is not agreement. Our soundbite society has idealized concepts and have made dialogue of almost no value. I am sure you are well aware that if a person is opinionated in the area of religion or politics, dialogue is almost impossible. Both sides of the argument lose their ability to wrestle ideas or have the ideals of those agendas brought into question. When this happens, both sides become polarized as they move further from the truth and teachability. Both lose touch with reality, and eventually none of what either side says is any longer based in truth. The conversation degrades to layered responses and conceived ideas manipulated by fear, suspicion, and half-truths. If the dialogue is superficial or ordinary, polite conversation, there is nothing to hear. Both the hearer and the speaker have no real need for listening mastery. But even in these engagements, the speaker will gravitate toward the one who is engaging them the way they like to be engaged. This is a perfect place for you to test your new powers and to see how fast even strangers will take to you the moment they think you have a listening ear. Listening in conflict. I must tell you the story of kicking the tire. As it goes, there's a young woman on the side of the road, and apparently she's stranded and upset, kicking and yelling at her tires. A young man, seeing her distress and knowing a bit about cars, he pulls up behind her to save the day. "Hey there, can I help you? What's wrong?" She pauses to be saved and heard. "My car died, and it's because of these dumb tires. I just bought them at a discount tire place. I knew I shouldn't have bought these cheap tires." It didn't take the genius more than a few seconds to figure out that the car didn't die due to the new tires, so he offers his expert assistance. "I think we need to take a look under the hood or possibly check and see if you're out of gas." She gives the young man the look and goes right back to yelling and kicking her tires. Along comes the second car and parks behind the now bewildered young man and the less than calm young woman. Out steps an older man, very calmly looks at the situation and asks the young man if he can help out. The young man concedes that the problem is bigger than him and responds to the older guy, "I can fix cars, but this lady's a wacko." So the old man walks up next to the woman and begins to kick the tire alongside her. He even yells louder than her at the dumb tires in that cheap store that sold them to her. Almost immediately, she calms down and lets the old guy take over because he seems to have figured out what she was saying. Now she can rest in the hope that she has an advocate. Once the old guy sees her calm down, he asks her, "Can I have your permission to try something else? Kicking the tire isn't quite working as fast as I'd like." The young girl replies, "Well, sure. Whatever you want to try is fine with me." He walks back to his car and returns with an old gas can and pours gas into her empty tank and starts the car. "There you go. You just need a little bit of gas. Looks like those tires are just fine." She smiles a little embarrassed and says her thank you to the old guy, ignoring the young guy completely, and drives off. The young man looks with the obvious question written all over his face. What the heck just happened? The old guy says, "Sonny, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast." Then the old man walks away. We are with our teenagers, our bosses, and our spouses in such a hurry to be right that we lose the person. Therefore, no matter how right we are, we lose. The power of roles. Role relationships. Everyone has a sphere of influence. If you're influencing someone for the negative or for the positive, you're still leading. You can be leading someone to mediocrity, but you're still leading. One of my goals is to help you find your voice, what you are divinely inspired and called to do. When you discover what you're divinely called to do, it becomes dynamic. Dynamic means it has a life of its own. Just like in a culture, a lot of the things we've learned were never actually taught to us. It's the dynamic of the culture. I want to talk about role relationships and how many of them today have become dysfunctional or misunderstood. Many of our conflicts come from dysfunctional role relationships, and a lot of our lack of fruitfulness or the lack of momentum is because of a misaligned role in relationships or an undefined, incorrect role relationship. Role relationships are rarely taught specifically, but they are learned immediately. As in the life of a 2-year-old child, watch the dynamic of a toddler and the way they interact with mom when it's just the child and the mom in the room. The toddler has a style of communication with her, and they set themselves in a role. The toddler knows whether mom is either the lenient parent or the disciplinary parent, and they respond to mom accordingly. The toddler knows how to work that relationship, but the moment dad walks in the room, the 2-year-old child switches roles. Even at 2 years old, they switch the dynamic of how to talk to mom when dad is present. When dad is in the room, the toddler is a completely different person and changes the way that he or she communicates and the different ways to act. Cries a little longer or whines a little less depending on the role. It's also interesting to see how a 2-year-old changes the dynamic of their behavior when they're surrounded by a large group of people. Again, the 2-year-old changes the role. They change the way they respond to a different environment. Some children who are completely rebellious and tiresome in their requests will become obedient in other situations, but they actually modify their behavior based on the roles and the relationships that are in the room. Just as with the example of the toddler, we can watch people in different situations apply different role relationships to modify their behavior based on a role. Some people may think, well, this starts getting a little bit complicated, but I want to tell you how uncomplicated it really is and how well you already handle it. For example, a husband and wife are driving down the road together with their children. Let's say the parents both work in the same business together. One of them is the owner, the other spouse is an employee. They also both attend the same school. As well, go to the same church. As these parents are driving down the road and having their conversation, they will automatically switch roles and act or communicate with each other depending on what the subject matter is about. If these parents are talking about their children, their roles will change and the way they talk to each other changes. When the subject is switched, and the subject matter can change within the same sentence, to talk about school, the parents are now co-learners. They are now helping one another with school subjects. They're co-laborers on the same task, and they change the dynamic of even the words that they use to communicate some of those things. When these parents start talking about their professional business, he's suddenly the boss and she's the employee. The role relationship changed again, and there's a level of leadership and submission in the switching of the role. You can actually see people switch roles back and forth over and over again. So knowing this is the case, we should become masters of communication and role relationships. You can actually know and understand that there are roles being defined in your communication with your relationships, and you can start defining them accordingly. Instead of just allowing the role and the social environment to define the role, you decide what you want to be to this person in your life. Push and move the relationships in your life. Define the roles and styles of communication and help the relationships move forward. Become a leader in understanding roles. Personality. No matter your personality type, it's important to find the true you. If your personality type is the aggressor, the get things done kind of person, or the life of the party type, it is very possible that much of your motivation is coming from a negative voice or emotion. It's not that your entire personality is based on negative motivation, as we're all a mixture of positive and negative motivators. But the point of this exercise is to view yourself from the seat of truth. Find what your inner motives are so that you can become more genuine and therefore more happy. I'll use my journey as an example. As a young married man, I was the most studious of entrepreneurs. Nobody read more, nobody tried more adventures than I did. I made sure my time was spent wisely and learned to speed read hundreds of pages a week and had volumes and volumes of questions just waiting to be asked. With any chance I got, my questions were ready for those who were in business or who had measure of success in any area. Now, those character traits all seemed like noble traits until I evaluated why I was working so hard and why I was so driven. It turns out that growing up in extreme poverty, I believed that I needed to drive myself to excess or I would fail in my duties as a father and husband. The voice of poverty echoed into my responsibilities of caring for my young family. So, what is a person to do? We can't just quit because we find our motives are not pure. Instead, we purify our purpose and resolve our story based on a heart that takes correction and life of mastery. Layers. For the past 30 years, I've been studying the human psychology and human engagement. I've found a condition among many individuals that is far too common called layering. You can see the layers in most every person you meet. It has many different manifestations and titles. In some cases, when a person expresses aggression, it's pretty obvious they are just afraid and using aggression to cover up their fear. Another instance of layering is when a person is the life of the party. But what is really happening is that they are uncomfortable with silence and they are forced to keep the noise of their own voice filling the room. In relationships, we're trained to respond to a person's layers and we are duped into believing their layered reasoning. This is just the way I am, or it's my personality. When in reality, it's a defense mechanism to mask their real motivations. I propose to you that if you spend just a little time listening to their real intentions, you will be one of the few that gain a skill that's rare in today's society. Imagine for a second you walk into a situation and because of your new navigation superpowers, you can see the intentions, the fears, and the true motivations of people speaking. The ability to speak to a person's real need and real motive makes you a leader, a coach, a mentor. To become the voice of the trusted advisor or the guru of the intentions of men. Navigating conversations to get to the real issues is not difficult or nearly as far off as it might seem. The greatest obstacle to finding this superpower is that your own layers are in the way. A person of true achievement and success is a person who rules himself while trying to rule his affairs. The mastery of your own motives and intentions will help you not to respond from a place of weakness. So, when the people around you are codependent, or angry, or manifesting confusion, you are able to remain steady and not respond to the seas of layered personalities. Instead, you can see clearly to remove the pain and to build a bridge based on truth rather than false layers. Becoming unlayered. We all live with layers, or what is known as personality masks. In the workplace, for instance, people are in performance mode and are not showing their true selves. The same is true for people in relationships. They display their well-behaved self, when in reality their true self is nothing like what is seen. There may currently be people in your life that you have conversations with on a regular basis, but you have never actually met the real person. We as human beings have developed defense mechanisms to protect ourselves when we get hurt. When we are afraid, we develop techniques, personality traits, and behaviors that protect us from the dark and scary world. There is an entire society that has learned to be dishonest and feels safer in a cage of fake performance. The cages we've built to protect ourselves, in reality, enslave us. Even if you make great achievements in every single area of your life using this book, but you never become real or honest, you will never find life to be satisfactory. For more information on advanced personalities, please go to my YouTube channel and search for the Personality Webinar.